Good evening and welcome once again to the Marty Heiser Show. We have an incredible show lined up for you. Tonight we have two prominent guests. One stared down and went toe-to-toe with the communists. So he comes to this country with an understanding of the beauty of freedom and the ability that we have in this country to vote and have our vote count and not be done away with vote fraud. The other is Carl Higbe, United States Navy SEAL. He's actually gone face-to-face with communists both in Afghanistan as well as Iraq. We have these two gentlemen. They're going to be with us today. And then following that, we're going to have a roundtable discussion with Dave Straight and Jim Bolano, our resident professor. So I just want to thank you so much, Peter Lumai. You're running for Secretary of State here in Connecticut.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate it very much. And Carl Higbe, thank you again for your service, as usual.
Glad to be back. Thanks for having me on. I can't believe you keep having me back. So.
No, listen, you've graduated. We've seen you on Fox News, on Hannity, and Greta's show. And I just appreciate you coming out here and playing a little small ball, too.
It's always good to come back to where you came from.
Okay, excellent. So Peter Lumai, you have an incredible story. Tell us about it and what has possessed you to want to run for Secretary of State here in Connecticut.
Well, until a couple of years ago, actually, I considered myself not to be a political person. Mm-hmm. Even though I followed politics, I was always interested in knowing what's going on in my state or in the nation for that matter. But if I were to tell you briefly about my background, about 26 years ago, my three brothers and I came to the United States as refugees. And we escaped communist Albania. Right. And at that time, anyone who dared to even mention leaving Albania, let alone leave Albania, escape Albania, would have either been executed or imprisoned for a long time. Wow. It was a very, tough communist system that we had.
Socialism says it's going to create these utopias, yet they have to have barbed wire machine guns to keep everyone in their utopia.
Yeah, absolutely. It took us 72 hours to walk over the mountains to arrive in what used to be Yugoslavia. Wow. And they took us into a refugee camp over there where we were processed to go anywhere in the world we wanted. But the most disturbing thing about escaping a communist country is the fact that your family pays a price if you do that. Because the moment my brothers and I escaped, armed agents of the government, Albanian government, showed up and just rounded up my entire family. My parents, brothers and sisters, because I left behind 7 siblings. We're 11 siblings altogether. Wow. Nieces and nephews, and took them into a labor camp, a concentration camp. And my father passed away, died in that camp. He never made it out of that camp. Wow. And I still believe, and I always believed, is that he sacrificed his life so his sons could live in freedom. Because sometimes it's within you. You're born with that feeling that you have a God-given right to live free. And that is one thing that attracts millions of people to come to the United States, to live in the freedom that this nation provides. And once we arrived in the United States, the first job I ever held over here, actually, I started working in a Burger King, flipping burgers, and I was very happy to do that. It was a minimum wage, by the way, but I was doing very well.
Not because, $15 an hour?
No, it was not 15. It was not $15. I was able to enroll myself in college eventually. Once I graduated from college, I investigated white-collar crimes, fraud investigator, served as a fraud investigator in New York City for a number of years. Enrolled myself in law
Rudy
school.
Giuliani, right? You worked in his office?
During his administration, yes. And then I went to law school, graduated from law school, passed the bar, became an attorney, established my own small business, and here I am.
You're the embodiment of the American dream. And I got to ask you, you grew up in a communist country. You see what an intrusive, all-knowing, all-involved government does to people's lives, to people's families.
Absolutely.
What do you think when you come to America, where it used to be kind of in vogue to be free and brave and self-reliant and things like that, and the government that governs least governs best? What do you think when you see recently in the federal, state government, where we've been electing governments that want to tax more and regulate more, and it's like a nanny state. Any problem you have, you go to the government because they're going to figure everything out. I mean, it's got to blow your mind because you see the end, like Albania, 1970s, 1980s, and you got to flee it. Well, that's got to be, they call it cognitive dissonance. What does it mean for you?
Look, what makes America exceptional is the founding documents of this country. When you have the Declaration of Independence, that if nothing else, you look at the words that all men are created equal. Then you look at life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, which are God-given rights that Americans, human beings, have. Then you have the Constitution of the United States, which supplements, if you will, the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
But the entire Constitution, when it was written by the founding fathers of this country, the purpose of that document is to keep the government on check. To limit the government.
Yeah.
It's like a restraining order in the government so that individuals like you and I can remain sovereign.
Yeah.
We're losing that. And
Yeah.
that's what I've seen in Eastern Europe, where the government is so overreaching that they have complete command and control over the individual.
Yeah.
And once you have that command and control over the individual, you're going to wind up bringing socialism to this country. And we have tried that.
Yeah.
For over 70 years, Eastern Europe and Russia and China, it doesn't work. It's a failure. It's a system that has proven to itself to provide or just produce equal misery for the citizens.
Yeah.
Nothing else. It doesn't produce anything else. And by trying to import to United States that kind of system, I think it's a huge mistake that we're making as a nation.
Yeah, I know. We got this little political cartoon. And by the way, you are a candidate. You're endorsed by the Independent Party. You're endorsed candidate by the Republican Party.
That's correct.
So just my half-cocked little political cartoons here. I don't want you to, have to buy off on all of it. But I'm just doing my job, and he's putting the Constitution through a shredder. I got a couple more of those, so we'll sprinkle them in. Carl.
What's going on?
You served in Iraq. You guys, you served in Afghanistan or in the Middle East. Iraq.
Yeah.
You cleared these guys out of Tikrit, Fallujah, Mosul, all these places. You've seen men die in battle.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind now when you see ISIS come swept back in? We didn't have a residual force there. What does it do to you?
I tell you, and I talked about this in my book, and while I was in the military, they said, look, you can't say stuff like this. It's undermining all the efforts we've put forward in Iraq. And I said, but if we pull out, if we stop fighting on our terms, because that's what happened. We started winning the hearts and minds. We started fighting the war on their terms, honestly. I said, we're going to lose this war, and we're going to lose more men. You look at the number of troops who have died under Bush and then died under Obama. Even though we were in that country far less time under Obama, we lost almost twice as many troops under him. And, I mean, it's pathetic to see his foreign policy and how it's just completely failing. The ISIS is now running rampant. They're not fighting on the geographical borders that we honor. They're fighting on tribal borders. They're into Syria, they're into Iraq. They are going to do whatever they want and whatever it takes. I was in Fallujah in 2009 and to see the areas that I fought for, and I had friends die in very close proximity to me for the rights that of these people to have the free government. And this just proves that the Iraqi people as a whole don't care enough to actually do something about this. They might cry about it in the media, but the bottom line is if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Now, when you talk about the rules of engagement, and this brings it home quite a bit to you. For example, just to lay it out, and you correct me if I'm wrong. For example, I guess upwards of 60% of the fatalities in these wars are from IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And if there is a device found in a battle zone, the old rules of engagement is you blow it in place, right? And then somehow this bothered the niceties of the local population. They didn't want the bomb that was planted to kill your fellow
somebody living in their neighborhood.
Living in their neighborhood. When it's finally uncovered, it upsets them if you blow it up in place. So the rules of engagement were you have to very dangerously transport that bomb back to your home base and explode it there, and that caused casualties.
It killed a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
He said, this is not safe to move. They said, bring it back anyway. Those are the rules. I said, okay, followed rules, and he followed his orders, and now he's not with us.
So when you have an administration that dictates these rules of engagement that puts our, essentially our fighting men and women with one hand tied behind their back, it's no way to run a war.
If you're not willing to be as ruthless as your enemy, you've already lost the war. And that's why when people ask me, like, well, what do you think we should do there? Should we put boots on the ground? It's like, well, yeah, we should. We need to. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but the troops join because they want to go over there. They want to fight. They want to fight for their country. So, you're just going to have to, we're going to have to suck it up. We're going to have to put some boots back on the ground. They say, well, you can't occupy these areas forever. Well, guess what? We still have troops in Korea. We still have troops in Japan. And look at how bustling they are.
Yeah.
They're doing great.
Best thing you can do for your country is lose a war to America. Just ask the Germans. It works out good.
It works out.
Caller, Do you have something to add to our two guests? Peter Lumai, running for Secretary of State in Connecticut. He'll put a tamper on the election fraud that's going on. And Navy SEAL Carl Higbe. Do you have something to add? Oh, by the way, the phone number is 438-2003. Feel free to call in, 438, if you have a question. But go right ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for you. Earlier you said you were talking about government regulation. Now, you spit that out like it's an overall encompassing term. What specifically do you mean when you mention government regulation? Be specific. I want to hear your answer.
Excellent question. Okay, here's stupid government regulation. They have a thing where if you power wash a house, they assume that there's lead paint on the house. So the government, the EPA, has dictated that you have to put plastic sheeting completely around the house. So when you power wash the house, you have to catch all the water and take it off and safely dispose of that because they fear lead paint is on the house. That is a stupid regulation that the government has come up with for the painting business, something that I'm aware of and understand. That would just be one stupid regulation. You've been involved in business. You've seen where the Secretary of State and the state government has been involved with that. Can you give our dear caller maybe one or two other stupid regulations? How about the business entity tax, just to start?
The business entity tax actually that we pay in our state is that you establish a business. Just for having a business, you're going to pay a tax. Now, that tax is going to hurt someone who is trying to have a business, a new business in our state. Instead of penalizing someone, instead of rewarding someone for starting a business in our state, we are penalizing them. So that is another business regulation, if you will, that I think we should do away with it and try to encourage people to create businesses. And by creating a business, you're going to be able to create a job, you're going to be able to expand, more people are going to be employed, and more taxes are going to be paid because you have more people working. So instead of discouraging people from creating jobs and businesses, we should encourage them to do that. Taxes do the opposite.
40% of the new jobs created in this country were created in one state, the state of Connecticut. Businesses are fleeing California and running to Texas because it's a welcome business place. I have another one of these great political cartoons. This happens to be Illinois, but you could put in there Connecticut as well. And it's businesses, if you see here, businesses are fleeing, and the guy is saying you'll regret it, and this is the governor of Illinois. Same thing could be said for Connecticut. It's considered one of the most unbusiness-friendly states in the union. Businesses are fleeing here. Populations are fleeing here. It's a bad situation. And I know you Democrats run this state, and you guys are really smart, and all this careless, heartless
they drive hybrid
Republicans.
cars. That makes them better than us, right?
Exactly. You're better than us and everything like that. But for the run-of-the-mill guy, and believe me, the Democratic Party has long since not represented the little guy. The little guy is the independent businessman, the guy that likes to maybe go fishing and hunting on the weekend, and we'll talk about that in a second because they're coming after your guns as well. But the limousine liberal Democrats that are running this state right now are killing the little guy. Taxes are going up. They couldn't care less. They just want to have more money for the government, more regulations. And you notice, you've got kids, they're in school. You think they're going to find a nice job here in Connecticut, raise their kids, and have your little grandchildren jump up on your lap at Thanksgiving? It's not going to happen, because if they want to get a job and they want to improve themselves, they're going to hightail it out of here to like Atlanta or Florida or Texas or something. But we can reverse this thing if we get guys like Peter in office and also Tom Foley.
You know, what's funny about that is in states like Connecticut that are far left, very, very blue states, the answer to the overburden of government regulation is always more government regulation, which is like, come on, guys. Figure this out. And you look at states like Oklahoma or Texas, states that are very conservative, they have very low unemployment, they have a huge growth. I mean, the conservative principles have been proven time and time again. The free market exchange works. It works. And that's guys like Peter, I mean, he's seen the worst of the worst when the government controls everything.
Absolutely.
I mean, we need the free market is the greatest invention ever.
Yeah.
It creates the better product for the consumer.
Free market capitalism has risen more people out of poverty, and the reverse is true as well. When you have socialism and communism and the government just takes and takes and takes.
Just think about Detroit. Until 1963, Detroit had the highest income per capita in the United States.
Yeah.
Until 1960, Detroit was pretty much ruled or led
Governed.
or governed or whichever you want to choose. By
Ruled
Republicans.
is good. Oh, I'm sorry, ruled.
Now it's ruled. Look at how that's working out for them.
But they were Republicans until 1960. From 1963 to today, Detroit has become bankrupt. The failed liberal policies
I don't think Connecticut's far behind it either.
implemented in that city, which are being implemented in our state also, are destroying our well-being and our businesses and are forcing us to move out of these cities. And that is wrong whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. These are common sense issues. It shouldn't be an issue of political party affiliation. It's just common sense. As Carl said, if you have a regulation that is hurting us, and you come up with another regulation on top of that regulation to resolve the issues that are challenges that we're facing, you're just building on regulation upon regulation, making it harder for you and I and others to survive here. So it's time that we use our common sense to resolve these issues. Look at the candidates, if they have the fortitude of running for an office, understanding the challenges, understanding the issues. Can they provide some solutions to these problems? Do they have the backbone to stand up and say that it may not be popular that we have to do this, but we're going to have to do this for the sake of saving businesses and saving families and making sure that your neighbor is not going to lose that house and that your neighbor is not going to lose that job. And we must do this.
But the problem is, how do we get that message across? Because the Democrats, they're happy to give away our money from that, garnered by that business tax. I mean, they essentially steal it from us. So how do we beat it? I mean, I fought this when I was running for Congress. How do we sell personal responsibility, liberty, and freedom to the people? Because they are honestly rejecting it. It's unbelievable. It's so hard to sell freedom to people. So from where you came from, how do you entice people to want to assume personal responsibility?
We went to Yale University last night and we spoke to a number of students over there. And what was interesting is that how many young people understand the challenges that we're facing. However, as leaders sometimes are failing to go to these inner cities and to the younger generation and explain to them and talk to them and try to recruit them to be part of the solution of the problems that we're facing over here.
I'm telling you, some of the younger people, like maybe at Yale, when you come out, well, maybe Yale, you got to,
I just happened to be there last night, so I'm mentioning
the college, the unemployment rate is somewhere around 25% for recent college graduates.
Absolutely.
I have kids 28, 25, and 22, and all of their kids, their friends are living in the basement of their parents' home, looking at the fading poster of Barack Obama, hope and change, and living with mom and working down at the Starbucks. And so, some of them, it used to be cool to be a Democrat, because we care about people, and you Republicans are just like my daddy's politics or something like that. But not so much anymore. How about you young folks think about a little bit of freedom, a little bit of self-reliance, a little bit of allowing the government to get off your back so you can go out there and get a high-paying job, buy that house in the suburbs. What the heck? Buy a car. It's not a bad thing to want to prosper and improve yourself, and that's what the Republican Party offers.
Well, that's the thing, too, is the Republican Party is the party of freedom. People say, I vote Democrat because I'm pro-choice. Well, what? Republicans are pro-choice on literally everything: taxes, guns, economic prosperity. So we're pro-choice on everything. The problem I see is the Democrats we're for the little guy, we're for the minorities and things like that. I think people forget that it was 119 Republicans that freed the slaves without a single Democratic vote. The Democrats are the ones who stood up the KKK. The Democrats are the one who stood up the California Workingmen's Party, Dennis Kearney, that started the unions.
Lyndon Johnson wouldn't have passed the Voting Rights Act if it wasn't for Republicans.
Exactly. I mean, the Republicans have consistently been of, by, and for the people.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there's my kids at the youngest age. Interesting story. My wife is from Canada. She became an American citizen, so she went back to the judge, and I don't know if you had to do the same thing. You had to ask you some questions about who the president was.
Sure.
And I pounded into my kids. I said, "Who freed the slaves?" And little kids, they're 1, 2, 3 years old. They go, "Abraham Lincoln," and I go, "Was he a Democrat or a Republican?" "Republican." I don't know if they are today, but I drilled it in. Anyway, so she goes back to the federal judge to become a U.S. citizen, and they asked them about, and she had the kids in tow, asked them about Lincoln, and they did that thing.
Sure.
He pounded the desk and said, "You're a citizen," right
Yeah,
on there.
it's natural. Yes.
Caller, do you have something to add?
Yeah, Marty, I heard you guys, I've been on hold now for a while, but you guys,
Well, we have a lot on our mind. There's a lot of hot air in this room.
well, you got that right. There's a lot of hot air, and you guys love to perpetuate it. But like what you said earlier there's a lot of jobs leaving the state.
Yes.
Marty,
Yeah.
this is the place to get a job if you want to work in the solar industry. Ross is hiring. Ross Solar is hiring.
Yeah, and how do they get their money? The subsidies from the government.
Longevity's hiring. And you talked about the
Solindra's hiring. Wait, no,
yeah.
they went bankrupt with
Yeah.
$1 billion of our company. Sorry, they're not hiring now. The federal money's gone.
Hey, Marty, you blurred out Solyndra. You blurred out Solyndra, but do you realize that the same fund that the money for Solyndra came from, the money for Tesla came from, and Tesla has paid back that money. Plus,
That's run by a South African. That's a private entity.
Well, also,
What's that?
when you charge a Tesla, who pays for the electricity for that thing?
yeah, Tesla borrowed money from the 1705 fund
And paid it back.
and paid it all back.
Great.
$1 billion.
The
in
cars are
interest.
70,000
That's great.
apiece. That's not for the little guy.
That went into the American taxpayers' pocketbook.
All right.
So, the same fund, the same money that came out of that fund went for Ivanpah, which is the largest solar generating plant in
All right.
the world.
Okay, I got you. Solar's the way to go. Just by the way, you think you're going to vote for Peter Lumai here? He seems like a pretty straight shooter. What do you say?
What's that?
Are you going to vote for my guest for Secretary of State, Peter Lumai? Come on, throw him a bone.
Marty, if you put me in front of a firing squad, I wouldn't vote for a Republican.
Ouch!
Man,
Ouch!
it's funny.
All right, thanks. Now, what about that? How do you overcome that? The man said, if you put me in front of a firing squad, I would not
That's
vote for
the
a
problem.
Republican.
Is you overwhelmed them with facts right there. I mean, those Teslas are $75,000 cars. I can't afford a car like that. No, most people can't. I mean,
little guy.
and that's the problem. Is they're just so stuck in that lane. He probably drives a hybrid or something like that, vegan.
Yeah, how we overcome that is that certain people have made up their minds that they would never vote a Republican or a Democrat, and from my point of view, that is narrow-mindedness. You look at the issues, you look at what's facing our state and how horribly we're doing as a state, and don't vote for the party, vote for the candidate. Look at the candidate's positions, and if this gentleman has made up his mind that he would never vote a Republican, that's what's giving us the one-party system that we have in our state right now. No checks, no balances. They can do pretty much anything they want to do, and that's where they are taking us, because there is no check on them whatsoever. I mean, we got the highest tax increase in our state's history under Malloy. Where did all that money go? What did he do with it? He's coming back to us again to ask us for another tax increase. Is he doing better? This gentleman who just called in, is he doing better today than he did 4 or 5 years ago? Is his neighbor doing better? Is the job creation better? I mean, he was talking about the solar industry and all those things, but when you have the government subsidizing job creation, that is not a job creation. That is your tax money and my tax money going to an industry that has not been proven to be successful yet. Leave the free markets determine this instead of the government.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. In the example of Solyndra, which they hate, liberals don't like when you talk about Detroit or Solyndra or the communist countries that fail miserably.
When you give them the facts,
don't deal with.
No,
the
when
facts.
you give them the facts, expect them to throw accusations against you. That means they're losing the debate. They have run out of ideas. They have no ideas right now. They have no solutions to the problems that we have. You're going to hear accusations about the candidates who are running for statewide offices because the only way for them to capture attention would be by throwing those accusations against the candidates. But I think the Republicans stand on the side of the facts, and we can provide the solutions to the problems that we have. And I hope that the voters are going to, take a risk, if you will, and vote for us this year, and see 4 years from now if we're going to do better.
Well, the fundamental.
Caller, how about that? Are you going to be willing to vote for Peter Lumai for Secretary of State?
Yes.
Oh, great. See, we already, the guy with the firing squad is on, you're okay. Well, great. Do you have a question for our guest this evening?
Yes, I would like to, based
based upon the last gentleman that called in, we have a very large group of people within the United States who have been brainwashed to think the way he is. He doesn't even realize he's being brainwashed. Our schools are mainly run by Democrats for Democrats to achieve the Democratic ideal. That's what your kid hears 9 hours a day, nonstop. Now they put in an educational system in Connecticut, Common Core, which even raises this to higher stakes. And oh, by the way, Marty,
Yes.
I enjoyed you being on the front page of the Ridgefield Press.
Thank you very much, dear caller, for pointing that out. Yes, taking a stand for the little guy. That's you, dear caller. So, thank you.
I would like their reaction to. I don't think you can stop this until we get some inroads into the educational system. And guess what? I don't see any Republicans bothered about it. They don't want to do it.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for the call. Appreciate
There's
that.
plenty of Republicans bothered by it. The problem is this is a matter of the parents of the children are going to have to speak out very, very loudly.
Right.
This is a legislative issue, obviously, but if we really want to nip this in the bud sooner than later, you will get faster government action on your behalf if you raise a stink in the media. If we start telling the parents to get out there, go to the meetings, become involved in your community. That's how we're really going to call attention to this. And once you call attention to something, that forces people to educate themselves on. And that's the ultimate road here is victory through education.
Absolutely. Peter, we got a minute left. Look into that camera and tell people first how they can help you if they want to get involved, your website.
Absolutely.
And give them 2 good reasons why they should vote for you.
Well, thank you very much for giving me this chance. And if they want to get involved, it's peterlumaj.com. What makes me uniquely qualified for this job is the fact that I have my background is that I investigated white-collar crimes in New York City for a number of years. Voter fraud is a white-collar crime. I litigate cases in court every single day, excluding weekends. I'm a litigator. I wouldn't have any problems with identifying voter fraud, locating it, and make sure that we prosecute the perpetrators who would want to determine the outcome of our elections by perpetrating fraud in our system. The other thing is this: I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking for an opportunity to hold this office for 4 years and make sure that if I get elected, we clean house and come back in 4 years and report to you and make sure that we win your trust for years to come.
One final question. There's been some concern in this state about the Second Amendment coming under attack. I know some of our viewers, I know for sure Dave Strait, who's going to be coming up on the roundtable, is concerned about this. But where do you stand on the Second Amendment? And essentially, now we have state officials knocking on your door, wanting to see what kind of firearms you have, what kind of, how many bullets are held in your gun and so forth. Where do you stand on that?
Always pay attention to the language that the liberals or the Democrats use with regard to the Second Amendment. They will tell you that you don't need that weapon, you don't need that gun. Actually, it's not that you need it, it's your right to have it. They want you to confuse needs with rights. When the Second Amendment was written by the Founding Fathers, the meaning behind it is that the citizens of this country should be able to defend themselves as a natural right, even against your own government, a tyrannical government. And that was the meaning of the Second Amendment. Now, I lived under a tyrannical government, and I have seen what a government can do to its own people. When my family was picked up and taken to a concentration camp, the only people with guns were government agents. My family couldn't defend itself. So that is the reason why the United States of America has a Second Amendment. I think we are the only nation in the world actually that have that. But it served us very well, and I'm a Second Amendment guy.
Thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wish you all the best. Carl, as usual, thank you for your support and your service to the country, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come in.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, now, by the way, before we leave, but then we're going to go to the roundtable. But Carl Higbe, you may have seen him on Fox News. Yeah, we're talking network. We're talking around the world. He's been on Hannity. He's been on Greta's show. And this is his book, Battle on the Home Front. And I'm telling you, he's a very interesting young man. He's served our country in one of the most elite combat units really in the history of the world. You can go back to Sparta to come across the combat units like the United States Navy SEALs. He's defended our rights, he's defended our freedom, and I would definitely recommend this book, Battle on the Home Front. He's got a lot of good ideas. I'm optimistic about the future of this country when I see young men like himself. And Peter Lumai, I'm telling you, from the Republican point of view, and we have a lot of fun on this show, I know, but he really comes with a wealth of knowledge. This isn't a full-time professional politician. This is a man who's got some very definite ideas. He's seen up front what this socialism eventually brings, and it's not a pretty picture. And I just think that it's such an important election coming up here in 47 days. And when you have candidates like Peter Lumai, Tom Foley, and some of the others on the Republican line, I'm optimistic for Connecticut if we can get this thing turned around. If it's just going to be business as usual, and I'm speaking more to the young people out there, because older people are pretty much set in their ways. You heard the whole, put me up against a firing crowd, I wouldn't vote. But you young people, we're talking about your future. Do you want to raise a family? Do you want to have a place where you can live? Do you want a place where you can have a job? Vote. Give the other guy a try, I guess is what I'm saying. Now, we are joined by Jim Bolano.
Marty.
And Dave Straight.
I'm surprised I'm still welcome here, Marty.
You are definitely still welcome here. Not only are you welcome
I
here.
had to get directions how to get here tonight.
You haven't been here in a long time,
I know.
and it's not from one of us begging you to appear. You always have something on your mind. Share with the vast viewing audience
and
what's
you're
on
always
your
willing
mind.
to squeeze me in for 30 seconds. I appreciate that. So, okay, let's get another perspective on ISIS.
Please.
I have never been more sick and tired of all these politicians getting on in front of the media saying, we need to be tough. We need to deal with them. We need to squash them. We need boots on the ground. How many of those people are volunteering to send their kids in there? Not many, huh?
Well,
and why is that? Because nobody wants to see their kid die there. Mm-hmm. There's only one solution in the Middle East. First of all,
rich man's war, poor man's fight, something like that.
So I mean, think about this. So now the Obama plan is we're gonna vet 5,000 Syrians, rebels. These are the good rebels. And then we're going to send them to Syria, and after about 18 months, they're going to be ready to go back and fight ISIS, who by then will have 50,000 people. This is the dumbest plan we could ever conceive. This is the result of 60 years of screwing up in the Middle East. We've caused this mess. We trained them, we educated them, we armed them, and it's coming back to haunt us. One of the last speeches Bush gave regarding Iraq was, we can't withdraw troops too early because we're going to have a bigger problem on our hand than we started with. That was pretty prophetic. People got to give him credit for that. There's only one solution in the Middle East right now.
I'm dying to hear what
Are you dying to hear?
I'm dying.
On a drum roll.
Listen, for our vast viewing audience out there, there's only one solution. One, you find first of all, we've got to airlift the Christians out of there. America has a history of doing the right thing regarding airlifting people out. We did it for the Hmong people. We did it in Somalia. We brought them to, those are true refugees. When they've done nothing wrong, we have to defend our fellow Christians. When they're getting their heads cut off, we airlift them out of there. Then we turn it over to the people and just let it sort itself out. The Muslims will deal with it their own way. And the other thing we got to do, reinstate the draft. You know why? Because then everybody's going to vote on this thing, right? Right now it's a sanitized war. Because first of all, when we say boots on the ground, we don't have boots on the ground. We have an army for hire out there. It's Blackwater. It's all these contract killers that are going and fighting the war for us. So the American military doesn't have to do the dirty work. We just pay to have it done with money that we print or borrow. The whole thing's pretty messed up, right? Reinstate the draft, and then see how many moms and pops are willing to get tough on ISIS and go over there and blow them up. Right? Now, when they come to our shores, it's a different game. Right? Then all bets are off. You got to seal the border. They're coming across the border. Seal the border. It's pretty simple.
Okay, couple thoughts. One, what if the Christians that have lived in those regions for centuries don't want to be airlifted out?
You know what? They got a choice to make. Get your head cut off and get airlifted out.
Okay, well, some would say in a civilized world you shouldn't have,
What are their choices?
well, I'll present other choices. The other is when, they come to our shores, then let's talk. I would submit that 13 years ago they did come to our shores and they slaughtered 3,000 of our fellow citizens, and not responding to that would invite more attacks.
I didn't say don't respond.
Okay, but I'm
Right.
saying when you say come to our shores, it's a different story. I
Right.
think they have come to our shores.
Right, and what was our response?
We kicked the hell out of them.
Who?
Well, guys like Carl Higbe went over there and did a fine
And that
job.
was productive in the graveyard of nations.
I think it was productive in the sense that it defended our homeland and it was
Really?
a response to terrorism.
Really, and we attacked Al Qaeda, who's stronger today than they were when we attacked. Right, and now we've got Hamas, we've got Boko Haram. Right, we've got more terrorist organizations today than we ever did. And how do you think Afghanistan's doing today? We have control there.
I think they're hitting us up for some more money of late.
Yeah, how are we doing in Iraq these days? Pretty good.
No, it's not.
So we kicked someone's butt. We don't know who, or it cost us a few $1 trillion.
Okay,
we
well-
killed millions of people. I don't know how that worked out too good for us.
I think it worked out good in the sense that we responded to an attack on the homeland, and I think not to respond would invite more attacks. That's
Okay.
what I think.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could have targeted terrorist organizations rather than take on the whole country with bombs. Anyway, that's a thought. Jim's got ideas on this.
Okay, Jim, help us.
Where do we go?
Well, we're talking about
ISIS. What do we
we're
do?
talking about ISIS and what we should do. By the way, here's a political cartoon. If it was the cutting off the head of a driver, maybe a president would be a little bit more focused.
Here's kind of the issue. Dave got one position, and you both have valid points in your own way. But the problem for the United States over there, and this has been happening for 10 years, is that when we do go in around the Middle East in all these different capacities, we don't ever know who we're dealing with. We create these vacuums, and it never seems to end up very good. You take out Saddam Hussein, you put in Maliki and a Shiite friendly government.
Yeah.
There again, they have the internal strife with Sunnis. A lot of these people that are backing ISIS are disgruntled Sunnis out in there.
Take out Mubarak and you put in Morsi.
You put in Morsi, that doesn't work. You take out Gaddafi, and now Libya is a terrorist state.
Yeah.
You try and take out Assad, and we're funding them, and that's the birth of ISIS.
Right.
So that's the question: is they have this internal struggle over there, which we don't really know anything about. We're not very good at it, and it just leads to more chaos. So the idea, and this is the debate we were having outside, we're talking about, our boots on the ground, and Obama has ruled it out, and that's kind of a silly thing to rule out anything as a commander-in-chief. But the thought of Americans putting another 100,000 troops, which what it would take to beat these guys, it's going to be out of the question in the short term.
So, let's look at this globally. Are we all going to really live in a world where you have this marauding army that just goes in and wipes out people based on their religious beliefs? Where they just uncovered in Australia today, they were planning to just take a cell out and do that. Do we just say, well, that's just their way of doing business, and who are we to judge, and let it burn itself out, and we're going to sit here and play golf and go to football games and eat pizza and not worry? But I'm not. I do have a little skin in this game, and I'm a little burnt out on nation building, which I think is what you were talking about. Yet at the same time, I feel like if someone comes up and punches you in the nose, if you don't respond, you're going to get punched in the nose again. And so there's some visceral part of me that wants to respond and defend, when I see a Foley get his head cut off, say, that's my fellow American, and this can't go on.
Yes.
So help me
I'll
sort this out.
I'll tell you one of the unintended consequences or effects of what's going on in the Middle East is it's kind of the end of gun control in America, right? Okay, background checks, everybody can sign off on that. But in terms of seizing guns and limiting your right to defend yourself, when you see people getting their heads chopped off and your government can't do anything about it, I don't think people are going to sit tight and let you confiscate their guns anymore in this country, right?
Well, I would say, especially if what was purported to be unfolding in Australia,
Yes.
and it seems like they were pretty on top of
Oh,
it.
and
But
they have a gun ban there where everybody was supposed to turn in their guns too. You remember that? That was about 10 or 15 years ago,
Okay.
and there was about a 10% compliance on that one. Anyway,
Not
point-
unlike here in Connecticut, where you're supposed to hand in your guns as well.
well, yeah,
Certain type
but
of-
the point being that people are realizing that your government can't defend you.
Mm-hmm.
The police can't defend you. You have to be responsible for your own defense. And the only way you can defend yourself is to be well armed. So anyway, but
It's kind of interesting because you're kind of like a hawk on the personal defense, defending yourself,
Absolutely.
blowing people away, but
Yeah.
kind of a dove on the international.
No.
I don't want to send troops overseas to go accomplish the same
okay,
thing.
but send troops where to do what?
Well, that's an important question.
Well, that's kind of a big question.
Okay, well here let's roll back the clock. Okay, December 6th, whenever it was, 1940, whatever it was,
Right.
they'll live in infamy. We're attacked by a nation state.
Yeah.
Now, in that circumstance, you would say, yes, we were attacked. We need to respond.
Certainly.
Okay, so that is a
Yeah.
war that you would sign up. So you're not opposed to projecting American power under any circumstances. There are certain circumstances that you would. Mm-hmm. Okay. Same thing with Nazi Germany, although it's interesting because we didn't go into Nazi Germany because we thought that they were killing Jews. We went in there because they were violating nation states and crossing borders. Okay, so are you saying what's going on right now in the Middle East and ISIS doesn't rise to the level that, say, entering into World War II did? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're certainly saying that. In other words, okay, we were attacked on 9/11.
Correct.
And so we turned the entire Middle East into a war zone. Just ignited the entire region. Right?
Well, let me just walk you back a little
a
bit.
lot of this is
okay?
the result of poverty in
Okay,
horrible
but
global economics.
After 9/11, what we did, we went in and the Bush doctrine was said, if your country harbors terrorists or supports
Yes,
terrorists,
yes.
we're coming after you.
Didn't attack North Korea.
Okay, well, but what they did there, they went in and they specifically targeted Al Qaeda. And specifically, it was horseback riding special forces working with the Northern Alliance that backed Al Qaeda up into this place called Tora Bora. They called in B-52 strikes and blew the hell out of it. And they gave Osama bin Laden's radio to some other guy. The guy went that way over the mountain. Osama bin Laden went that way and set up in Pakistan. So it was a very focused operation. There were boots on the ground, but it was a light force, and they went after Al Qaeda. What I hear you saying is good, should have stopped there. Going into Iraq was a big mistake, and look at this mess as a result. Is that basically what you're saying?
Well, one of the things, and people need to be aware that George Sr. in Gulf War I, he stopped at the border of Iraq. There were a lot of critics that said, look, go into Baghdad, clean it out. And he said, no. We have a coalition of the willing. We had, 63 countries around the world that were signed up on that one, all engaged, willing to support that.
Yeah.
The Saudis, all the Middle East countries were engaged in that.
Bangladesh sent 2 camels.
And they said, yeah, but they were camels. They were good camels.
Good, yeah.
But the point was that he gave his word. Our goal is we're going to kick the Iraqis out of Kuwait. We're going to stop at the border.
Right.
And he did that.
Right.
He maintained credibility. Probably an appropriate use of force.
And let
But you
Saddam
also-
Hussein in there as a bulwark against the
Against
Iranians.
Iran.
And that worked out pretty
we
good
created
too.
that vacuum too. Back in the
So you're saying Gulf War I you're good with?
Yeah.
Okay. We're not that far apart. So
That-
Gulf War, hold on, just so, World War II good, Gulf War I good, invading and going after Al Qaeda in Afghanistan good. Right?
No. Well, invading Afghanistan, absolutely horrible.
Okay, but
Disaster.
going after Al Qaeda in Afghanistan with the Northern Alliance, going in there, Tora Bora.
I would not have taken that approach. No, what you did was you created a recruiting arm for terrorism by doing that.
Well,
You absolutely did. These
Okay,
were
but-
Saudis, Marty. These were Saudis, and we're attacking Afghanistan.
yeah,
It's-
but they
it's
were
convoluted.
we were attacking Afghanistan because they were harboring Al Qaeda.
And how many
Al-Qaeda was
people were they harboring?
in Al
A couple
Qaeda?
hundred?
Yeah, I saw the jungle gyms. I
Okay.
saw them on the video.
Yeah, a couple hundred guys.
Yeah.
We scorch a nation.
Yeah.
It's idiotic. It's mind-boggling. It's the stupidest. It's the graveyard of nations. Every nation has failed there.
You're referring to Britain, Russia, and
Pretty
I
much
think
everybody.
Alexander the Great also
Yeah.
got his head
Yeah,
right to him again. Yeah, I worked with some Afghans.
They
There's some pretty
just
tough
want to
guys.
grow. They're dope.
Go ahead.
You know, well, Hitler actually gave us a bit of a break in World War II. You know, Hitler declared war on the U.S. after Pearl
That's
Harbor,
true.
so we didn't have to declare war. If he didn't declare war, it would have been a decision we would have had to make to go to Europe. It wasn't a done deal because we
Correct,
were
yeah.
there. You know, back in the back about all these terrible things in the world. Of course, it gets under American skin to see this, especially when Americans are beheaded.
But I sense I might be being baited by that.
Well,
Like,
back-
having
back-
the
back in
exact
the-
reaction that they
yeah, well,
want.
back in the well, that's the thing. Back in the 13th century, you know, the Crusades were going on. We were trying to remove the radical Islamists from the Holy Land, and there was actually an effort by the Crusaders, the Europeans, to team up with the Mongols. Genghis Khan and his Mongols and his kids. And the alliance never got together, but the idea was we needed something bigger because these folks were dedicated and they were dug in. And for America to do anything without people in that region, the countries in that region willing to do it themselves, just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense as far as getting rid of ISIS, because we don't know who ISIS will be the next day if we get rid of ISIS a little bit.
So just out of curiosity, what does our world look like when you have not just a terrorist cell or a group of guys hanging out in caves, you know, going Allah Akbar, but you have a standing army that has revenues, that has petroleum revenues, that is going.
That's
going
kind of a misnomer. When you think about maintaining an army, there's a big resupply issue there, right?
Right.
They got to feed them. Where's the food going to come from?
They have
They've got
oil.
money.
They're getting $1 million a day from Turkey selling oil on the black market for $40 a gallon.
You can shut them down economically. If you have $1 trillion, but you can't spend it anywhere, what good does it do? Right? You need food. You cut off their food supply. You cut off their ability to sell oil. Nobody buys their oil. I mean, you can shut that down.
They're buying. You do know they're selling oil right now. They have these Iraqi oil wells, and they're selling it to the tune of $1 million a day in oil.
Yeah, but here's the issue with that. This has been the issue with terrorism since the embassy fell in Tehran. We're always going after some boogeyman. Now we know the 9/11 folks were Saudis. Iran is funding Hamas, Hezbollah. We never go after the funders of this because it's going to rock a lot of boats. We're talking about probably hitting places in Saudi Arabia, starting up with Iran, starting up with Qatar, starting up with Turkey, starting with places that are supposed to be our allies. So we've never dealt with the problem because we never wanted to take it on full bore. So in that respect, we're just kind of, we're kind of aimlessly going after these groups. I mean, I think Dave's original point about them striking American soil, which they did on 9/11, and which is probably coming again. I mean, these folks are ready to do it, and we saw what happened in Australia. There's no reason to think there's not cells here looking to do it. But and in Europe has a bigger problem than we do with their population. So I mean, the fight's coming here, and that's really the thing. Are we prepared for that? You know, the one thing about going to war, I don't think I trust this administration in conducting war.
Yeah, they do have kind of a misunderstanding of who the real enemies are.
Can we do a rapid fire on some other topics?
Sure, go
Scotland.
right ahead.
It's a big deal. There's an independence vote.
Yeah,
We don't know how it's going yet.
What do you think?
I think it stays together.
Good for the UK? I mean, if they
I don't think
voted
it's
for
good.
independence, is that good for the UK?
No, it's disastrous for the
Really?
United Kingdom. I think so.
Really? Why is that?
Well, because you're breaking up your country. Where are you going to buy your whiskey
Really?
if you don't have the Scots?
So independence is only good when Americans say it's good. So when the Syrian rebels are fighting against Syria and they're trying to get independence, that's good. When there are rebels in Libya, they're fighting for independence, that's good. When Scotland wants independence and they're willing to do it peacefully, that's bad.
Well, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, I think is what you're saying.
But what's
as far as Scotland breaking up with England is like a 70-year-old couple filing for divorce. I mean, what's the point? You guys have been together for years.
What's Scotland's beef on independence?
I don't know
They're
exactly
not
either.
a colony breaking away. or they're not they don't want
It's
to.
less than 10% of the economy.
They don't want to create another. Well, there's oil there too in the North Sea.
And that's where all the nukes are.
Nukes and the whiskey. Let's not leave out the whiskey. I mean, lots of great golf courses too.
In the wall.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
The British Open.
No, I don't know. I mean, I think
It's a close call. They could do whatever they want. I mean, I'm not really big on it. It's their issue, not ours.
I think
it's going to go down.
If you look at this globally, though, I mean, and I'm beginning to look at it globally, this whole caliphate thing, and you have the Muslims as peace-loving religion, supposedly, and you got to ask yourself, there are only so many Western-style nations.
But nationalism is on the rise.
Do we really want to break them up?
Take a look at Spain. You see some nationalist movements there too. So nationalism.
It's all because of a bad global economy, and I'll get to that in a second.
All right, caller, do you have something to add? Please help us. We're flailing here. We need to know what's the answer. Do we just curl up in a ball, or do we go punch someone? Help us.
Now, I want to talk to my Koch brothers buddy, Dave, and I want to get his opinion on what's going to happen with this climate change march that's going to happen on Sunday, and the fact that there's going to be up to 1 million people that are going to be there. And what are all the deniers, the people that don't understand science? What are they going to say when they see all these people? And the fact that the United Nations on Tuesday is probably going to do something in regard to climate change. So I want to hear it from the voice of a denier. How's he going to handle it?
Well, my biggest concern right now is that the ice pack in the Antarctic has never been bigger in history. I'm deeply concerned about that.
I'm sure that's not true because there's climate change, and if we don't tax
there's polar bears floating on little cubes.
My response, and I get a kick out of him when he calls in, but my response there is maybe he can tell me how many of those people are going there because they actually are concerned versus how many are getting paid. The vast majority of those people that go to those protests are getting paid, and they don't even know what they're protesting for.
Okay, you have some other things you wanted to make sure.
Here's the other issue with that, with all the climate change stuff. The climate's changing, maybe yes, maybe no. It has been doing it. The idea that it's happened as a result of the last 100 years, you can't even give the 200 years, it hasn't done anything. That impact of 100 years of stuff, but of industrialization. But here's the other thing: America is supposed to bite the bullet on this, and the 20 most polluted cities in the world are in India and China, and they're not signing on to this. So what are we doing? So what's the answer? We're going to save the planet by assigning a carbon footprint to somebody and taxing them.
Yeah, no,
that's the answer.
Look, pay more taxes, you'll feel better, and you'll care about people.
It's just wealth redistribution.
You're just a heartless Republican that doesn't care. Caller, do you have something to add?
Yes, I do. Hello, Jesus is the Lord. How you doing?
Very good.
Listen, I just have to get back to this thing about the Middle East, ISIS, and all this, which is basically Iraq and Syria, independent Muslim state. Or Islam state. What the problem I can't understand is throughout the news, if you read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times every day for the last 2 or 3 years, the United States has been continually involved in destabilizing all of our friends and allies throughout the Middle East, whether it's Egypt and probably 3 or 4 other countries where we've helped militarily, monetarily and politically, and even through CIA and covert operations to destabilize these governments. Mubarak is gone. We did the same thing back with the Shah of Iran during the Carter administration. And these people have been our friends typically throughout the Middle East, and we've made way by ruining these governments for all of these Islamic rebels or whatever you want to call it.
So what's the answer? What's the question?
The answer is the United States should stay the heck out of all this in the first place. Mm-hmm. If we had done what we were supposed to do and honored the sovereignty of nations, we wouldn't have a terrorist organizations that we continually talk about today throughout these countries. And this is all being done just like it's in the EU. It's all about money, central banks, and the getting rid of sovereignty of nations for world government and central powers as opposed to independent countries, and recognizing the constitutional rights that we have in this country as well as the morality rights of individual nations. And all we're doing is giving way to terrorists. We continually to do it. And the only thing that happens is the United States continually gets involved in these endless conflicts. And right now,
This is
we're
TV, Marty. It's not radio.
supporting
Come on.
both sides. We're supporting both sides.
Hey,
in the
can we pivot to a different subject real quick?
And the governments. We're supporting
All
both
right.
sides with money and military power.
Thank you for the call. I appreciate it very
Can we
much.
just pivot for a second on something that's really been just really disturbing in the media lately?
Sure.
Is the situation on race relations. Have you heard this latest story on this actress that was in Django, and how she said that she was just kissing her husband in public, and she's black and he's white, and the police thought she was a prostitute, and that was the only reason that they were being harassed, and she was handcuffed? Are you familiar with that story?
I am familiar with it, yes.
And you heard what came out, and they have videotape and pictures of what was actually happening there?
I didn't get that far. No, I just got to the
originally
claims of racism.
They were just kissing, and it was racist, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Okay, here's the rest of the story. People in the building were videoing this and taking pictures. They were having intercourse in the front seat of the car, and she had her top up. When they kind of get done with the deed, they kind of tidy up and throw the waste on the front lawn. While they're in the act,
This is getting to a level of detail
come
that
down
makes
from
me
the
feel
building.
vaguely uncomfortable.
People
Go
come
ahead.
down from the building and said, guys, would you knock it off? We got kids around watching this stuff, knock it off. They said, screw you, and went back to their thing. Okay, the media runs with this whole thing it's racism, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And it's another false flag event. Just like what we're finding on the Michael Brown thing, right? The big, gentle giant couldn't hurt a flea. Then the videotape comes out of him in the store, strong arm robbery, all the rest, right? Then you think about, you go, oh, this is getting to be a familiar pattern. Remember the Duke basketball players? Oh yeah, then there's that. Oh, and remember Tawana Broadley? Oh, and then there's that. There's this pattern of the media seizing on these, trying to create racial events, seizing on them. And it's so dividing the country and perpetuating racism at a level that I don't think I've seen in 30 years.
Yeah, the country
president
does seem quite
has
divided.
divided this country more than anybody I've ever seen. And we got to stop that nonsense.
Well, the media loves sensationalism, so that's kind of their thing. What's kind of always odd about it is every time one of these events happens, people go on, and it's usually white liberals calling for it. We have to have a national conversation on race, they always say. But it's never a national conversation on race. It's a one-way conversation. You know, a conversation's supposed to go two ways. You know, anyway, that's about it. I want to say one thing about that.
We'll get that on TV, but they're talking about civil rights, right and wrong. Martin Luther King, I have a dream, and then Sharpton, they said, I have a scheme in America. You see that? You see that there is what you're talking
You would
about.
think if you listen to the media, on your point, that that one side of this conversation on race is made up of a group of white guys that are Republicans and Tea Party members and conservatives, and the other part of the conversation is women, Asian women, Latino men, African American men and women, and white women. Everyone else is on the other side. But that's absurd. Have you ever seen a poll that says what's the attitude of African Americans on immigration? I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
What's the attitude of Asian Americans on black crime? You never see those polls.
Yeah.
It's because they don't want that. They don't want a full conversation. They want this narrative.
Just to
it's
wrap
very
up,
frustrating.
we have Americans getting our heads cut off. We've got racial division and angst in America, and we've got an economy that's sucking wind in Connecticut.
Lightning
10
round.
seconds.
Within 60 days, you will have a city in America quarantined because of Ebola. You heard it here first.
Okay. Remember those countries in the Middle East that we call Libya and Iran and Syria are there. They're fictitious. They're French and British protectorate creations. So the fact that they're reforming, you know, that may not be a bad thing.
The election is in 47 days. Come out and let your voice be heard. Let's switch it up. Roll the dice. What the heck? How bad can it get? Good night, and we'll see you next week on the Marty Heiser Show, where?
You always get the truth, baby.
Good night. All right.